The message came at 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday. No greeting, no Leodin, just my father's voice measured and clipped like a business memo. Don't bother coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. That was it. 18 words, 18 syllables. If you count the pause before he hung up, I replayed it once, not because I didn't believe it, but because for some reason I expected to feel something bigger, a spike of rage, a punch in the chest, something, but all I felt was stillness, like the part of me that had been quietly bracing for this had finally heard what it always knew. My name is Harper Lane. I'm the youngest of two. My father Warren built Lane Audouar from the ground up, first as a mechanic, then a franchise owner, then a regional chain operator. My older brother Rhett is the heir. He always wanted, charismatic, reckless, untouchable. And me, I was the one who kept the lights on quietly, efficiently, invisibly. I didn't call back that night. I didn't ask why. I didn't even forward the voicemail to my mother Lynette, who historically stayed out of business matters when they became inconvenient. I just texted him 2 words. Understood. Then I opened my laptop, signed into the loan portal I hadn't touched in months, and did what I knew none of them expected me to do. I removed my name, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of clarity. 2 years earlier, when the family business needed to secure a $2.5 million expansion loan, the bank asked for a secondary applicant with impeccable credit. Rhett had debt, Warren had leverage, I had clean numbers and a Harvard MBA. They didn't beg me to sign, they simply handed me the papers, assumed I would. And I did, because back then I still thought loyalty earned belonging. But now, sitting alone at my kitchen table, the voicemail playing faintly in the background, I realized something else entirely. They hadn't cut me off, they'd simply confirmed what they'd been quietly doing for years. And this time I was ready to finish the sentence for them. I used to think my father loved order more than anything, but over time I realized it wasn't order, it was control. Warren Lane built Lane Audouar the same way he built our house, brick by brick, rule by rule, with no room for softness. The garage came first, the family came second, sometimes third. He had a saying, one he liked to repeat in front of employees, and even more in front of us: we don't hire outsiders, we raise replacements. And that's what Rhett and I were, potential successors. At least in theory. Rhett was 3 years older, louder, bolder, and always walking just slightly out of reach of responsibility. But he had the charm Warren respected, a swagger my father recognized in himself. So Rhett got the praise, the second chances, the leeway. I got the clipboard. By 12 I was logging tire shipments into QuickBooks. By 16 I was managing payroll at the 3rd location during spring break. I didn't ask, I was told. No thank yous, no questions, just the unspoken expectation that I'd be wherever the business needed me, available, obedient, tireless. My mother Lynette wasn't cruel, she simply disappeared inside her role, hosting dinner, folding invoices into envelopes, smiling through meetings, then pulling me aside after to remind me, your father's building something for us, be grateful, sweetheart. So I was, or I tried to be. I studied hard, got my MBA, turned down a corporate logistics offer in Chicago. Because Warren said family before ambition, he needed someone to help with the regional expansion. Rhett apparently was focusing on vision. I focused on everything else. When the opportunity came to secure funding for a new headquarters, I negotiated the lease, compared rates across 6 banks, landed a deal with favorable terms and a 3-year interest lock. But the bank wanted a second signer. Rhett couldn't, his credit was trashed. Warren didn't want to jeopardize personal assets, so they turned to me. No big speech, no dinner, just the papers on the table and a pen already uncapped. I hesitated, maybe for half a second, then I signed, because somewhere inside I still believed that if I showed I was loyal enough and dispensable enough, they'd finally see me. Not as the backup plan, but as part of the plan. Of course, they never said thank you, they just assumed it was my job. That was 2 years ago. I thought I was investing in a future we'd share. I didn't know then I was just making myself useful enough to be invisible. And if you're quiet long enough, you start to believe that invisibility is a kind of love. It's not, it's just silence mistaken for peace. The first crack didn't sound like breaking, it sounded like laughter, Rhett's laughter to be exact. We were in a quarterly budget meeting, just the 3 of us, me, Rhett, and Warren. I had flagged a vendor invoice, $12,000 duplicated over 3 months, a clear error. Or at least I thought so. That's from a friend of mine, Rhett said, waving it off like it was lint on his collar. Let it slide, he gives us good rates elsewhere. I looked to my father, expecting something, a raised brow, maybe a single word of scrutiny. But Warren didn't flinch, he just reached for his coffee and said, focus on bigger things, Harper, stop acting like an outsider. That word didn't just sting, it settled somewhere under my skin. I wasn't some recent hire. I had overseen logistics for 4-site expansions, renegotiated our fleet lease at half the original cost, and kept payroll balanced through 2 supply chain disruptions. And yet when I questioned anything that didn't involve spreadsheets or silent compliance, I became foreign. After that meeting, things changed subtly. At first, my access to our back-end systems began to narrow. I couldn't log into vendor platforms. Then the financial dashboard redirected me to a read-only page. The company credit card tied to my name expired. It was never replaced. Every time I asked, I got the same answer: we're restructuring or temporary system changes, or worse, don't worry about it. And yet I noticed Rhett had a new standing desk, a company-paid trip to Vegas labeled as Leadership Summit, and an office chair that cost more than my first used car. Something shifted inside me, not anger, not yet, but a quiet alertness, the kind that comes when your instincts whisper they are preparing a door for you and it only opens one way. I started keeping copies of everything: internal spending reports, meeting notes, emails where Rhett copied clients but signed using my name. At night, I organized them into a private folder on my home computer, one I called Shadow Ledger. I wasn't sure yet what I was building, just that I needed to hold on to truth while it was still in my hands. One evening, I reached out to Danielle Keller, a former classmate from law school. We'd lost touch for years until she helped her sister escape a messy divorce from a real estate partnership. I didn't tell Danielle everything, just enough to ask a simple question: if a co-signer withdraws from a business loan, what happens? Her pause was telling. Depends. If you're not a guarantor and you weren't involved in recent misuse, the loan can be reevaluated without your name. Quietly, legally, I exhaled at that moment. I didn't know whether I was planning an exit or building an alibi. What I did know finally was that the story I thought I was living, the loyal daughter, keeping the legacy afloat, wasn't mine anymore. They weren't just pushing me out, they were doing it slowly enough to keep cashing in on my silence. It was a Thursday morning in early spring when the final piece clicked into place. The trees outside my office window were just starting to bud. I remember that detail clearly, because something about new leaves made what I was about to find feel even more stale. I had just received my monthly credit summary, something I reviewed out of habit more than worry, but this time a line item stood out: Lane Holdings Deferred Payment Review. I hadn't seen that name used in years. It was a shell corporation Warren once created for real estate holdings dormant, or so I thought. Curious, I dug deeper. What I found wasn't surprising, it was worse. The expansion loan I had co-signed 2 years ago, the one used to launch Lane Auto Air's new regional headquarters, was in arrears, 3 payments late. The business was behind, barely floating on grace periods, and delayed vendor invoices. My name was still on the loan, and worse yet, it was being cited in communications with creditors as a reason to extend goodwill, because my credit was clean, because my finances were untouched, because I was, as always, the reliable one. But I hadn't seen a financial report in months. I hadn't been included in a board meeting since last fall. And the last time I asked Rhett for an update, he replied with a winking emoji: "And no worries sis, big vision coming." Vision didn't pay the bills. I pulled up archived records, traced invoices back 6 quarters, compared spending against budget projections I had written myself, and then I saw it. Over $40,000 in consulting fees, all funneled through a friend of Rhett's. Several entries labeled marketing testing had no campaigns tied to them. Fleet repairs triple billed, and vendor quotes signed with my initials, ones I never approved. It wasn't mismanagement, it was orchestration. That same day I met with Danielle again, this time in person. We sat across from each other in a quiet booth at a coffee shop she liked near the courthouse. I showed her everything. She flipped through the document slowly, lips pressed, eyes steady. When she reached the co-signed loan agreement, she stopped. "You're not listed as a guarantor," she said. I blinked. "Meaning what?" "Meaning they used your name to secure it. But you're not legally bound if you withdraw before restructuring. And if I do." Danielle set down the papers, folded her hands, and said something I've never forgotten: "You don't need to confront them, don't warn, don't scream, just move the brick holding up their wall and let it fall." I went home that evening and opened the folder I had renamed. No longer Shadow Ledger, now Redemption Plan. Inside were PDFs, flagged emails, account screenshots, and a draft letter Danielle had helped me write weeks earlier. Back when I still hesitated, I didn't hesitate anymore. They hadn't just pushed me out, they had used me until they assumed I had no more left to give. And maybe I didn't, but I had one thing left: to take my name. It took 4 minutes. That's how long the portal stayed open once I logged in using the administrative credentials I had created 2 years ago back, when I still had full access back when I thought I was building something real. The screen flickered once, then showed a notice colicant status active modification options available. I clicked remove, then I uploaded the signed withdrawal letter Danielle. And I had finalized 3 weeks earlier. I typed in my PIN, submitted, no alarm sounded, no confirmation emails. Just a quiet message in gray text at the bottom of the screen: update, received, processing, pending compliance review. It was done. The next step was risk control. I emailed the bank's loan manager, a man named Keith Herr, someone I'd negotiated with during the expansion phase. I attached a summary of financial discrepancies, vendor fraud, altered signatures, and access restrictions indicating internal exclusion. I was careful, clear, professional. What I didn't include was emotion. Within the hour, the bank froze the operating account tied to Lane Holdings and triggered an internal review of the loan quietly. No call to my father, no memo to Rhett, just a pause, a blinking cursor in their system where once there had been blind trust. While they scrambled, I moved. I contacted my personal accountant, Sabrina Kim, someone I trusted from my grad school years. We reviewed my exposure, ran simulations on worst-case scenarios. She confirmed what Danielle had said: no liability, no credit damage, not even a legal obligation to notify them. The trust one had moved my savings into last month was protected. That night, for the first time in years, I left my phone on silent, and actually meant it. I slept. When I woke up the next morning, there were already 32 missed calls. By mid-afternoon there were 78 from my mother, 13 from my father, 7 from Rhett, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize until I played the voicemail. It was Gordon Maddox, their longtime company accountant. His voice was high-pitched, panicked, almost cracking. Harper, call me now. This is serious. The loan's collapsing. The bank pulled support. We're at risk of default. You need to fix this. Do you hear me? You have to fix this. I listened to it twice, not because I didn't understand what he meant, but because it sounded like justice, and justice, when it finally arrives, doesn't scream, it echoes. By early evening, Rhett sent his first text: what the hell did you do? And then another: you're overreacting, we could have handled this internally. But the word we didn't land anymore. There hadn't been a way in a long time. Later that night, my mother left a voicemail, not angry, but quiet, trembling. Sweetheart, what's happening? Your father says the bank froze everything that they might recall the loan. Did you sign something? I did. But I didn't explain. I called her back, let the line ring twice. I removed my name. That's all her breath caught. But you can't just do that. Actually, I can, I said, and I did. She paused. Harper, this affects all of us. No, I replied calmly. You made sure it didn't. And then I hung up, not in anger and completion. They picked the restaurant we used to go to for birthdays, Leona's old brick walls, too many ceiling fans, and the private room near the fireplace where we'd once blown out candles and clinked glasses of ginger ale. But there were no balloons this time, no cake. Just my parents, Warren and Lynette, sitting stiff at one end of the table, and Rhett staring at his phone, pretending this was beneath him. There was also an empty chair waiting for me, as if they still believed I could be summoned. I arrived 15 minutes late on purpose. I wore gray slacks and a button-down blouse, neutral, unreadable. Danielle had once told me power doesn't shout, it arrives without apology. Rhett stood when I entered. Thanks for coming. I didn't come for you, I said, taking the chair slowly. Let's not waste each other's time. Warren leaned forward, eyes fixed on mine. You made your point loud and clear. No, I said, voice calm. The bank made my point. I just stopped protecting your lie. His jaw tightened. Lynette shifted uncomfortably. We're trying to hold this together. He said, you think you're punishing us, Harper, but you're punishing the legacy your grandfather built. I looked at him steady. Grandpa built a garage. You turned it into a dictatorship. Rhett scoffed. Oh, come on, we gave you everything. You gave me a job, I said, meeting his gaze, not a voice. The silence that followed was dense, almost warm, like a room that had finally stopped pretending to be anything else. Then Lynette, my mother, spoke almost in a whisper. What do you want, Harper? That was the question, wasn't it? Not revenge. I had already taken that. What I wanted now was clarity. I reached into my bag and placed a sealed envelope on the table. This is a signed affidavit confirming I've permanently withdrawn from the company loan, the board, and all business operations. You will never use my name again. Warren opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. I'm not finished. I took a breath. I'm also submitting an anonymous tip to the state auditor. There are funds missing, vendors, unpaid payroll inconsistencies. I slid the envelope forward. It's your mess now, fully legally. Rhett's face turned red. You're destroying us over ego. I'm not destroying anything I said standing, I'm just removing the illusion that I was ever part of it. I turned toward the door behind me. For the first time in my life, my father said the one word I never expected to hear. Harper, please. I paused, not from hesitation but from satisfaction. You left a voicemail telling me we were done, I said without turning around. I'm just agreeing with you formally. And then I left. The story made it into the papers, not the big ones, just a quiet piece in a local business digest. Lane Ottawa faces financial turmoil amid internal disputes. I didn't leak it, but I knew who did. Danielle called me 2 days later, her voice half serious, half smiling. When people lose power, she said, they look for someone to blame. They just didn't expect that person to have already walked away. After that, the voicemails turned sharp. From my father, you ungrateful child, we built that business for you, you're ruining your future. From Rhett, you think you're clever, but you'll need us someday. From Gordon Maddox, the accountant, do you even understand what this means? You've destroyed their legacy. But here's the thing no one said out loud, they destroyed it long before I pulled out. They destroyed it when they used my name, but denied me a seat at the table when they decided I was a threat, not a daughter, when they made me invisible. Now the loan was caving in, the accounts frozen, the vendor contracts unraveling. And me, I was untouched. No legal blowback, no financial damage, my credit intact, my savings secure. I forwarded the last voicemail to Danielle, then deleted the rest. I took my phone off silent, and for the first time in years it stayed quiet. No crisis, no requests, no fires that only I could put out. I moved into a small loft in downtown Portland, nothing fancy, just sunlight, clean windows, and space enough for both a desk and peace. I started consulting quietly, helping small women-led startups avoid the kind of traps I'd lived through, not because I needed purpose, but because I already had it. 3 months later, an envelope arrived at my new address. No return name, just the bank's logo and a tracking barcode. Inside was a single sheet of paper. This letter confirms that the commercial loan associated with Harper Lane has been formally withdrawn and restructured. No further obligation remains, no action required, no thank you, no apology, no spin, just a line drawn in ink in law. And finally, in truth, I placed the letter in a folder marked complete and slid it into the back of the cabinet. That night, I lit a candle by the window. The loft was quiet, the city below hummed, unaware and alive. I thought of that voicemail one last time. Don't bother coming to the reunion, we're cutting ties. They wanted silence, obedience, absence, and they got all three. What they didn't expect was that I would thrive inside that silence, that I would build something not out of revenge, but out of reality. I poured a glass of wine, opened a new client file, and wrote one line at the top: you're not difficult, you're just finally visible. And then I kept